All right, we're back. We're going to do part two. All right, so I have given this a few days. I watched the old episode. Obviously, I did the edit, but I watched it again anyway. And, I do want to be clear because I don't, obviously, like, I don't even know if I should release short form content because, people really don't pay attention and everything I say can be taken out of context. And I really want to double down on this climate thing in the sense that I understand that it is the number one most important problem. And when I talk about energy consumption moralism, I'm not saying let's just put the pedal to the metal and burn as much as we want. What I'm saying is, for one, we know that the corporations are the biggest polluter, not an individual. So when I talk about moralism, I'm talking about how we as individuals look at other individuals and say, I don't like how you are using energy. That's what I mean by moralism, because as soon as we start deciding who is able to use energy, who has access to energy, what types of industries, then we are creating a system of, just like I said in the last episode, like just like I said, like we are creating a system in which we are deciding who's in and who's out, and on an individual level. Because then you start to create regulations, and you create regulations against and I'm not saying no regulations. What I'm saying is when you get to the point where you start to regulate individual behaviors and you say, you're only, like if we actually got to the dystopian level of like actually like measuring everyone's carbon usage, or like every time you click a button on the internet, it's like counting away at your carbon usage, because every click does equal, electricity and water usage at a data center. And so that's why I'm saying, like, when you start to take streaming, for instance, or music or whatever, like you could say, you know what, like anybody whose videos are getting, under 10,000 views, all videos on the internet, for instance, take up the same amount of space. An hour long video is an hour long video. Basically, obviously camera quality, sound quality, there's different factors to the size of a file. But my point being that a Mr. Beast video isn't much bigger than my video. And I'm getting no views. I'm not getting a big crowd here. I'm getting very small crowd pulled here and don't even know who and the consistency or whatever. Like, so if we got into this, like, measuring contest, then we would say, all right, well, people who aren't famous aren't allowed to upload videos anymore. Like, people who aren't popular aren't allowed to be on social media. More importantly, if we got to the point of saying, like, all right, well, energy consumption needs to be labeled down to essential. Well, what's essential? Let's say, at that point, we would pare down to the point that maybe only the military is allowed to eat meat. Because if you're just a normal citizen, you get no access to meat, because the energy consumption that goes into meat isn't, it's greater than what you're allowed to get. Like I said, access to the internet. Why are we giving every Tom, Dick, and Harry access to the internet? The only people who need the internet are the government and certain corporations. Like, that's what I mean about this energy consumption moralism. It's very much one of these things where you start off saying, like, oh, like you shouldn't use AI and you shouldn't use crypto. And then you create laws where you say, all right, well, if you're going to use AI, then you have to pay a bunch of extra taxes every year. And if you're going to use crypto, you have to, and I'm talking about on the individual level. If we want to do this on industry level, that makes sense. But none of this matters. Like, taxing, yes, I do know that taxing will help mitigate issues, but it won't stop the pollution. So the reality is we need to get to sustainable answers. And the reason I'm saying we need to get to sustainable answers is because we have two options here. We either have to stop using energy, or we have to create energy that is better for us, that's not going to lead to the same climate crisis or is going to help reduce the current climate crisis. The reason I'm saying that we can't go that first option is because no one is going to. There is nothing other than guns and turning it off that is going to make people stop. And I don't think that helps, because the internet is the only reason we're having these conversations. Like, as a person who grew up feeling this way about politics, like, basically, like, seeing leftist TikTok is the first time in my entire life that I've seen people talking the way I do about the government, thinking the way I do about not just Republicans, but also Democrats and also universities. And it's like not the anti-intellectualism of the right, which is kind of what I'm surrounded by here in Louisiana and in New Orleans. It's just, we don't have the level of thinkers here for people to actually entertain thoughts of socialism, communism, at least not in the circles I've been in. And yeah, there's just not a lot of access to that type of information here and that type of discourse. So until the internet came around and I, was able to grow into a larger and larger world, and even then, like, the internet is such a hard place, like, especially as the algorithms grew up pushing you into funnels. Like, it's not until things have gotten this bad that I've actually seen people willing to go out and say things. And that even counts on me. Like, in my music, I've been very political in the past, but, like, I don't think that I've gotten to this level of political outspokenness. People who were close to me knew how I felt, but, like, that doesn't necessarily mean I was living my life correctly. And Yeah, so we can't turn off the internet. We can't turn off people's access to the democratization of content creation, which is, we did a whole series just on how the internet and these different digital tools allowed access. And I think that's important. Like, I don't want to see a world where, as much as I dislike the way we're paid on streaming services, I don't want to see a world in which people can't just upload their music to the world without gatekeepers. Like, I think that is so super important. And I just wish that it wasn't being used to literally, like, hunt and kill us. Like, or used to completely separate us from our wealth and our artistry. And, like, that's what sucks, is, like, by going past the middlemen, well, the middlemen controlled all the capital. Like, unless you learn to be a capitalist as a independent musician, you're not gonna get anywhere just by uploading your music on SoundCloud. Like, it's a beautiful, nice thing. It's great that we have access to these things, but the fact that it's being used against us, it's our creative nature. Like, me doing these videos, me doing all this, like, I'm being taken advantage of because Google and YouTube are going to make a bunch of money and I'm not going to get anything ever. And they're going to say, well, it's because, like, nobody cares about you. And it's like, but I do get views. I do get something. And in another sense, like, when you think about it in a capitalist way, am I using more energy than I create? That's how capitalism views everything. But even, this is why I'm saying economics is so important, even though a lot of people don't, money is made up, but it is still, the inch was made up, the foot was made up. It's made up as a measurement tool. The reason we have a measurement tool is to be able to make transactions. The problem is that we put human life and the value of nature into this measurement tool, and it was never meant for that. It was never meant for that. And that's the problem, putting everything through this one lens. If you're a hammer, everything is a nail. And that's what capitalism is. It's a hammer that wants to turn everything into a nail. Anyway, that was a lot. What I'm saying is, can't get rid of, like, the energy consumption isn't going anywhere. No one's going to stop. Like, even on the individual level, yes, I'm doing things to preserve energy. Hopefully you're doing things as well. But the problem is, if we start comparing what you do and what I do, unless we're going to get down into measuring kilowatts, it's all, just us feeling good about our consumption. That's really what it comes down to. And if we start to really get into this measuring energy consumption, then we start to get into moralizing energy consumption, and then we get into punishing people for their energy consumption. So that's one route we can go. Or we can go the route, which, to be clear, I'm talking about individuals. I do believe that corporations need to be responsible for their energy consumption. That is the biggest problem with capitalism and industry, is that all of the business owners are allowed to put all of their losses out into nature, onto the people. Like, they don't take responsibility. And my problem with that is that, like, if you're going to create something that changes the way the world works, then you have to be responsible for all of the effects of that, no matter how expensive they are. And if you can't be responsible for the effects of your technology, you deserve to go out of business. That is survival of the fittest. So the bottom line is, yes, seizing the means of production. I don't think that there should be private corporations. I think we need to democratize access to the money, period. I think every corporation, like, none of this is going away. That's kind of like the main thing I'm saying here is, like, no, we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. We're never getting rid of the factories. We're never getting rid of the cars. Like, maybe we can get rid of the cars, and we can reduce the cars. But what I'm saying is, there's only so much you can do to put things back in the tube. So you're not getting rid of guns. You're not getting rid of cars. You're not getting rid of the internet. You're not getting rid of social media or AI or crypto or any of these things. So the reality is, the only way to get rid of it is by putting guns in people's faces and turning it all off and going back to caveman days, which is still going to be authoritarianism, totalitarianism, brutalization. That's not a future in which we care about women, children, the disabled, minorities. Like, it's not a world in which anyone does any better except for the people who are stronger. So we can't go backwards. Technology is democratized access to everything, including our ability to, like, not be reliant on the strongest man. And going backwards in time, that is what happens. Why? Because the strongest man, if he's a bad person, then everybody is a victim of that man. That's patriarchy. And that's really what we're trying to undo here, is all of that shit. But what we're not trying to undo is the internet and, like, the lights. Nobody wants to go back to hunting and gathering. Okay, so if we're going to go forward, the only way to go forward is to figure out real solutions. And figuring out those solutions is going to involve working together. It's going to involve finding sustainable solutions other than polluting the drinking water, using up all the drinking water, using up all the fossil fuels, and just dumping it into poor neighborhoods. Like, when I said everything I said before about energy consumption moralism, the entire point is, it is another thing to fight over, and nobody is going backwards. We're not trying to be the Amish, because that's the reality, is the only people doing it right are the Amish. If we're gonna, like, argue, and I just mean, like, in their climate footprint, because as far as, like, how they treat their women and children, that's a whole nother story. And that's my exact point of why you don't want to go backwards. So just had to clear that up, because I feel like watching, part one of this, people are going to be like, oh, this guy just doesn't care about the environment, even though the first thing I said was the environment is the most important thing. I'm just also very aware of the fact that even if we, even if we give the land back to the indigenous peoples of the world and, try to I wouldn't even say reverse course, but at least try to like slow down and put the brakes on as much as possible. Like if we did every possible thing to decolonize the United States and its footprint on the entire world, people still wouldn't want, like, people still need to eat. People still want the internet. People are still going to want entertainment. So, I don't see a world in which those things stop without violence. And I mean like violence forcing them to stop and then violence continuing after they stop. Because if we don't have access to food, people get violent. And I talked about this a few episodes ago with Katrina. When the lights go off, the scary, violent people come out and bad things happen. So if we want a revolution, it's got to be a revolution where the lights never go off, because a revolution where the lights go off is one in which the weakest among us are victimized further. And I thought that was the world we're trying to avoid. So you can't have energy consumption moralism and think that you're like creating a better outcome by judging individuals for how they use their energy because you think that the way you're using energy is better than them. Like, and I could just go through a million examples of that, but do I really need to? Like, just think about your own energy consumption and think about the things you do that you think are necessary that aren't, including this. Like, like how many times are you watching a YouTube video or watching something on TikTok or Instagram? Some of it's important political messaging. Some of it is important that we need to get out to each other. And some of it's just cat videos and it makes us feel good, And some of it is, straight up propaganda that we absorb. And, that's what the streaming services are. That's what our entertainment industry is. Like most of our art is propaganda, and what's built into it is capital and consumption. And, everything is selling you a product at the very least. Even if it's not telling you to love and trust the government or the corporations, it's definitely telling you to buy Coke. You know what I mean? So, all right, so cleared up the climate moral stuff. Yeah, we got to come up with the Star Trek future. If we don't get the Star Trek future, we get the, Escape from New York, Mad Max future. We get, but I think that's where we're going first anyway. And I hate to be the pessimist or the realist or whatever, but we are already in fascism. We are very much in the early stages, if not fully into techno-feudalism. And we are also in the revolution. So I've been asking in a few episodes, and I've been asking, people around me, how close are we to revolution? And the reality is we're in it. We're in it. Like, it's been a slow burn, but like you could say that it's been happening since Occupy. 2008 with the crash. It's just that it keeps getting different voices, and honestly, like, Obama kind of put it to sleep because people, as I said before, like, were lulled into this false sense of security that, like, oh, the government isn't, the change is coming, the incrementalism. Like, having a black president was a breath of fresh air because we were like, oh, this is change. And the reality is, when you look back, it was all superficial change. It was just the same thing in a blue suit, like, that's really what it comes down to. But for a lot of us, in my age especially, like, that was us seeing something better coming. And this reaction just really show like the whole Trump reaction, the whole like the only reason Trump became the president is because he harangued Obama on Twitter for 8 years. As a Twitter commentator, he became the president. That's it. Like I seriously like the guy's got no policy. The guy is just a show for the techno feudalists and Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin and all these jokers and Bannon, all these idiots. And the revolution is on. Like I think it went to sleep during Obama, but I think Occupy woke a lot of people up. But a lot of those people, the Occupy people, a lot of those people bought Bitcoin. And people who started buying Bitcoin then probably turned into libertarians and probably said, oh, the most important thing in the world is to have financial security. And then they turned completely, they got orange pilled. And you can say that I'm kind of in that same boat where like I came in much later, but once I learned farming, and honestly, farming was what made investing click for me because I learned farming, and I've told this story before, but I learned farming, and then I got a few stocks later because some advice from my accountant. So I decided to get a retirement account, which then I started learning stocks, this and that. Then I got into crypto, and that's when I started learning the philosophical implications of money. I started learning the history of money. I started really understanding like how all of this stuff works. But more importantly, I honestly, got into human coordination. Like I had never thought about technology as something that was actually I did, but not in this way. Like I had never thought about it as something that was actually bringing us all together in a positive way. Like globalism is industry all coming together and businesses all coming together. And yeah, we got a lot of great innovations and products out of that, but the entire drive behind it is greed, not bettering the world. And so I think that like the internet came later, it did come later after globalization. So, but the internet giving individuals, now we can talk with people in other countries. Now we can see how the other side is living. And we're all realizing like, oh, wow, like, like we're in America, for instance, we're seeing like, we always heard about it, but it's distant. You don't see it. You don't know about the cows at the slaughterhouse, right? So nobody knew how much our lifestyle was hurting the global south. And now that people are seeing how much like for real seeing, not just like hearsay, not just he said, she said, we actually get proof from other individuals in those countries, like how they're living, how we're living. And, everybody sees that they're getting the short end of the stick. We can see the countries that are getting messed over. We can see that we're getting messed over. We can see, the United States is the Disneyland of the world, and we are paying for that. Like we pay for the entire world. And I don't mean that in a Trump sense. I mean that in a like individual, like you as an American pay more for things so that the rest of the world can have free healthcare. Like that's kind of why they say like socialism is a step from capitalism to communism. But the reason even socialism is an outsourcing of labor in a sense is that the countries that are able to have the free healthcare and the good social networks are the countries who have really great like regulations against industry. And so those industries, the same ones that are in the United States, since they can't do it to the European citizens, since they can't do it to them the same way, they do it to us because we don't have the same regulations. So when Europe tells, you can't have this kind of food, you can't do these kind of internet practices, you can't, have these like lax regulations here, they just push all that stuff off the Americans and we buy it. Like we get the expensive, shitty, subpar products so that the rest of the world can have socialism. And that is a function of capitalism. It's not a function, people would hear that and be like, oh, well, we need to that's when you get into the America first, protectionism, isolationism, all this bullshit. And the reality is we waste so much that we know there's enough wealth, there's enough food, there's enough houses. It's all just greed. We could create a system where everybody has enough. The capitalists at the top of the chain choose not to, and everybody in the middle who agrees with them is a class traitor. End of story. If you identify more with celebrities and rich people than you do with a homeless person, you are the problem. End of story. Every human being is important. We don't live in a hierarchy in which people are less important just because they've lost the game that they never really got set up properly to even play. I kind of feel like I should just call it here. But I got the AI stuff to get through. But I feel like it's almost a whole separate conversation. And maybe, maybe this is the part 2. And I leave it at that. Because honestly, the AI stuff doesn't matter. Except, in the sense that, I guess one thing I could pull from that is that the same way social media helps and changes the world, I think AI has the potential for that. And I understand the problems with it. And I definitely think that, I believe in boycotts and I believe in voting with your dollars. So I'm not telling you to go use ChatGPT or Claude or, I'm not telling you, I can tell you what I use for AI, but I'm not saying it as an endorsement because I don't necessarily know exactly the information. I don't exactly know the footprint of the stuff I'm using. But what I am saying is that just like the importance of uploading these videos, even though there's a carbon footprint, like the spreading of these messages, our ability to communicate with each other and communicate with the world, there's a value there. And I think that if you're a smart enough individual to understand why AI is dangerous, then you're a smart enough individual to use it and not get burned. At least, a good percentage of the time. I also think that if we're going to find these solutions, it's probably going to involve people using AI. The solutions for the climate crisis and stuff like that. I think that it's going to take some objective thinking out of the box. And I think that is, for me, kind of what AI provides as a sounding board. I understand it has hallucinations. I understand it's wrong. And frequently I will correct it and be like, I think you're wrong about this, or I know you're wrong about this. And then it will realign course. But I think the sounding board, it's very similar to having a human sounding board, except that sometimes you don't have the human sounding board that you need. So if you want to have a political conversation and you live where I live, it's going to be hard to find somebody who you're going to be able to get into the place where you're coming from. So these episodes, it's hard for me to have these conversations with individuals because I have to walk them through so many concepts. You know what I mean? And in a lot of ways, I'm expecting you as the audience to figure those things out for yourself, or to have been here so long that you've heard me talk about it in context in other ways. But I'm not necessarily gonna you're not going to have the ability to stop me to tell you to explain this or that about Ethereum or this and that about specific AI functions and whatever. So in a human conversation, you're often getting interrupted to explain something, you know, and it's something that like might be fundamental, and now you having to explain that thing, you realize like, oh man, I can't even really have this conversation with you because like I'm jumping to stage 11 and I've still got to walk you through at least a handful of the stages between 1 through 10, and even out the ones you understand already, there's a preconceived notion. And that's a hard thing about talking with people, is getting through their preconceived notions. Like when you use a word like liberal, like love, like God, when you use words, people have an image in their mind, and it's probably not the same image you have in your mind. And so you think you can just talk about concepts with people, but as soon as you do, like the misunderstandings come out, it begins to become a semantic conversation. And I think that semantic conversations are important because words are important. Yeah, so I think the value of talking to AI is that sometimes you can work through some thoughts that not yeah, let me preface this with, this is for things that you don't already necessarily have in your head, or maybe you've gone in your head for so long that you're like, I need a sounding board. So you start talking to AI about it, and you can get somebody who is willing to have an easy conversation with you. Not easy in the sense that it won't challenge you, but easy in the sense that it's probably going to understand your concepts pretty quickly. If it doesn't understand it the first time, you can tell it what you mean. And if it has its own preconceived notion based on the world, you can at least get it to play ball with your conversation for a moment. So there are times when you may want to try out a metaphor or an analogy, or just try to understand something through a different lens. And trying to get people to put on those lenses is really hard because people have to take off their own lenses first. And I feel like AI is kind of a blank slate in that way. And this is probably why we've had like the AI psychosis and stuff like that. Like if you get in there and you're expecting this thing to prop you up, it might. Like it, I haven't had that too often, but I also tell mine to challenge me. I also usually put things in my prompt that are like, tell me why I'm right or wrong. Tell me, you give me explainers. And the reason is because then I can see in its explanation whether or not it's understanding me properly. And these are things you can't have in a human conversation because humans don't cooperate in the same way. So like when people are trying to win in a conversation a lot of the time, it's not that they're not trying to necessarily understand your point. And oftentimes, even if that you begin with like, oh, I want to run something by you, you're quickly battling against their preconceived notions and their inability to just like go with you on a conversation. And so I'm not devaluing human conversation. I think it's really important, and I learn a lot from the pushback, and it is super valuable. And so there's sometimes when I have conversations with people first. There's sometimes when I have gone around with something with people so long that I'm like, let me run this through the AI and let me see, what this thinks. And I use multiple AIs sometimes. I'll check through multiple sources to be like, what does this one think? What does that one think? And then sometimes there's things that I come up with so fast, and I just know it's going to be hard to have a conversation with a person, or I don't know who I would talk to this about. So I just go straight to AI with that conversation, and I have it there. And then working it out that way, sometimes I have a more approachable way of bringing it to a human, because then like I've kind of already like found the pitfalls. I've kind of already like know where people might get hung up, so I can just either like address those points early, or Yeah, find some way to like circumvent those particular things to get to the conversation I'm trying to have. And I'm not saying that, I know it kind of sounds weird. It's like, oh, are you, like, why can't conversations just be natural? And they can, but sometimes you're trying to learn something or understand something and you can't get there because the person you're having the conversation with is not going to let you have that, whatever that thing is. And sometimes that can be important, but sometimes it's just like somebody's putting their foot in the ground because they don't like what you're saying. They don't like your beliefs. And this happens a lot when you're talking anti-capitalism. Like when you try to talk about socialism or communism, lots of very poor, very not wealthy, uninformed people will start arguing with you about the necessity of capitalism. And like so right there, like anybody who's going to be like that, I can't have a lot of conversations with because I know off top you live in this hierarchical mind and I'm not going to be able to get you to see something. Or even if I do have a conversation with you about AI or crypto or some other emerging technology, like I can't trust your vision of the world because your vision of the world thrives on this idea of CEOs and kings and presidents and emperors and the whole thing. Like you're so a lot of the yeah, like anyway, there's value there, and I think that it's the same probably in scientific fields and political fields and other things where there's probably times where you want to work through a theory or a process and the people around you are just making it so difficult. And you can work with AI to really like get to the logistics of a thing and not get bogged down in personal feelings. And the reason I'm saying it that way is not because we shouldn't value personal feelings, but because when we overvalue feelings is why we end up with the Republicans winning everything. Because that's all they're just a bunch of emotional babies, and like their willingness to completely turn this country into fascism just because they don't like gay people and they don't like abortion and they think that everything should go their way, and they don't want people to have individual rights. They hate the individual. They love capitalism. They hate the individual. The more individual you are, the more they want to kill you. And and it's funny because I even thought this as I was saying it, but I said in the last episode, like, oh, like the right and the conservative consider themselves the party of fiscal responsibility, but really they're the more social ones. They're the ones that care a lot more about your identity because they are willing to kill, kill for your identity. People on the left are willing to live in and sometimes die for their identity. But the people on the right are willing to kill you because of your identity. And they're doing it at the polls. They're doing it at the grocery store. And then if they can run into you in person, they'll do it there too. Psychotic fucking people. And I say that because anybody, like, I understand killing for our freedom. I don't understand killing because you don't, like, they're not the party of freedom. Freedom is liberty, and freedom is access to food, access to healthcare. Freedom is being in a country that cares about you, not a country that wants to kill everyone. And law and order simply means like punishing people that don't look like me and don't act like me. So that's why I say completely psychotic. So I think there's a lot of value to using AI. I think that the moralism of saying, "Oh, anybody who touches AI is an idiot." I think that the argument that AI is making people dumber. I can agree with that. I think that any technology by a dumb person used by a dumb person will make them dumber. That's what social media does. Like if I take some random idiot's TikTok and scroll through it, I'll probably never see a communist post. I'll probably never see any intelligent political post. I'll see a bunch of fucking gorillas beating their chest with their red hats and, doesn't realize how they've been algorithmed and they've been pipelined. And I do know I've been algorithmed and pipelined. It's funny because like I'll be watching like right now what my pipeline is trying to do is turn me back into a liberal. It's like basically I've had nothing but a week of leftist browbeating from like the most moderate liberals you can imagine. Like they are doing everything in their power to basically say that being leftist is racist, even though most of the leftist creators I follow are black women. So I have a bunch of white men and white women on my feed trying to tell me that I need to vote for Gavin Newsom and that leftist purity politics is white supremacy and patriarchy. Like, it's such crazy brainwashing. And but it's there, and then I still also, because my algorithm doesn't understand me because I throw it off all the time, partially because I watch investing in crypto stuff, crypto investing AI, it thinks I'm a red hat, like because that's how predictable most people are on the internet, that it's like, oh, you're into crypto investing AI, you're a red hat, so I'm going to feed you red hat content. But then it also sees me, interacting with leftist TikTok, and it says, oh, so you're more of a liberal because you kind of believe in capitalism. It doesn't understand that like I'm playing the game because I want to live. And that's also people that hate all the stuff I talk about crypto and investing and stuff. Look, I want a moneyless future, but that doesn't happen tomorrow and I got bills to pay. So the same way that everybody says like, oh, that's why I have a smartphone, even though it's like, hurting other people. As a leftist, I still have to have a smartphone so I can talk on TikTok. Okay, well, for me, like, I'm not getting paid by TikTok. Maybe you are, and you can live dollar to dollar, paycheck to paycheck, but I'm living on a paycheck. And so the only way for me to have a viable future is to invest in the system that's stealing from me. So, like, my ability to democratize the workplace is basically own stock of where you work, because if my company is going to steal my wages and turn it into a stock, I need stock. Like, and I understand, like, democratizing would mean that my boss, my company would be giving me the stock. I wouldn't have to go buy it myself. But this is the game. This is the rat race. And I'm not, the point that the reason my algorithm doesn't understand me is because just because, like, I'm going one step further doesn't mean I've bought the system. Meaning, like, the bottom line of the system is you gotta work. If you don't go to work, you live on the streets and you die or you go to prison. Like, we will find ways to put you to work if you don't want to work. So the bottom line is you work. So every left-leaning person works regardless of whether or not they believe in capitalism. Everybody works. And that's one of those things you can't get out of. And typically, once you go that next level of, like, owning a home, buying stocks and stuff like that, like, you have taken the bait because now you're, like, tied to the thing. I'm not that way. I'm not tied to the thing. I'm just basically playing the game and saying, all right, well, yes, having a job is necessary, but if I want to do better than necessary, then I have to do this other stuff that I don't believe in, and I can still do that ethically. Because I don't have to buy stock in, McDonald's necessarily. I can still, and this gets into moralism and we can go back and forth, but like one of the things I don't support is prison labor. So I have already boycotted everything y'all were boycotting. I already boycotted. Like when Starbucks, Target, Walmart, like all fast food, anything, like I boycotted prison labor 15 years ago, maybe longer. So I like was already looking at anything that I thought was remotely related to prison labor and cutting it out of my life to the best of my ability. So this is what I mean about the moralism, is because you can take my habits and I could say, okay, well, I get to judge you because you just figured out not to shop at Target. So you've been a bad person for 15 years. You're just figuring it out. And I'm not going to do that, because everybody needs to be like, we need to be embracing everyone's ability to learn and grow and change together, not abusing each other because you're not doing what I'm doing, Because the reality is, it's the corporations that need to change suit. Anyway, so like in investing, you can do things that are less guilty. And regardless, I think that like if your company is stealing from you, which if you're being paid a wage, if you're being paid a salary, your company is stealing from you. And so if your company is stealing from you, then you need to own stock in your job, or you need to own stock in other industries that you believe in more. You can own stocks that align with your values. And that's basically where Ethereum and Bitcoin fall for me. Like decentralized money, decentralized finance, the ability to interact internationally and permissionlessly. These are values that I think are important to a free society. And so I invest my money in that future. And so investing is also the current voting with your dollars and investing. Voting with your dollars in one way is to take them away from the companies that you hate and then buying into the ideals that you love. And that's how you create the future right now. Voting is a lie. Change is not on the ballot. The only other way to change the future is through violence. So you either figure out how to change the course of the economy, or you use violent revolution to overthrow and destroy everything. But as we've discussed, that second one hurts the disenfranchised. So the pen is mightier than the sword, and he who controls the spice controls the universe. And the spice is the money. So that's it. Like, and I'm not saying, let me be very clear. I'm not just talking about fiat currency. I'm talking about the money, whatever it is we're using to interact. Assets are part of this thing. So what I mean is, I don't know if I've stated this clearly as this, but I'm going to state it bigly right now. Our money is built bad. Our money is debt. So the reason you hate the economy and you hate money so much is because it was designed as a Ponzi game. We can create better money. Bitcoin is better money. Ethereum is even better money. So we can do it. And I'm not even saying those two are the end all be all. I've said this before. My thoughts are Bitcoin is the faith play. Like Bitcoin has to survive. It's the OG. Bitcoin has to do well in order for crypto to live. It is purely a faith play. Ethereum is the technology. Ethereum is the thing that says, all right, well, if you believe in us, then you believe that this mechanism can work. And so I think you need both, because Bitcoin gets the believers and Ethereum gets the philosophers and the logic people and the artists and the people who want to use the thing, the entrepreneurs and the thinkers. And I think that capitalism has given a stigma to money and even the word entrepreneur and all of these things because of the drive towards greed. And I think better money and better economics is the way through. And I'm not saying that because I'm saying money is the most important thing. I'm saying it because it is the one of the most valuable human coordination technologies we've ever created. Say what you want about capitalism and the global system, but our ability to be a global system relies upon money. It relies upon a communication that bridges languages and it bridges barriers, and it gives us the ability to eat foods from far off lands. And I think that there's a way to sustain that cultural value without living as slaves. And I think that creating a better economy and a better type of money is the bridge to us becoming a more moneyless and stateless society. And so, like, the ultimate goal is to get there, but it doesn't happen tomorrow. And the violent revolutions only bring out new violent oligarchs. You get another 300 years on the chart. Maybe you get a golden period in there where it's not so bad. But if you look at the United States, we've always been at war. We've never been a peaceful nation. There is nothing holding this together except money. And it's not in a good way. So I think that this human coordination technology needs to be reviewed, revitalized, revamped. And I think crypto is doing that for us. And I think it is the only decentralizing technology that exists. And if we can get to a better decentralized node operating way of doing everything, then we also offset a lot of the damages to the environment. And then creating, like green energy, finding ways to have our lifestyle, to have our cake and eat it too. And it can be done. And that is, to a degree, that is the magic of technology. Like, say what you will, but there is, the digital allows us a much larger universe than the analog does. So, stop judging individuals, judge the corporations, judge the people, the billionaires. And I mean, yeah, judge people, individuals that lick the boots. Those people are class traitors. So, but understand also that they are brainwashed, propagandized class traitors. And if you can't win an argument against them, if they won't listen because they won't, simply ignore them, cut them out. Like, I think that is part of the male loneliness epidemic, is like people are cutting you out of their lives. Like, other men don't want to be around you. Period. So, just disenfranchise them. People will learn to come back to the fold, or they will learn to die alone. That's it. Like, that is survival of the fittest, right? If people don't want to interact with society in the proper way, just don't talk to them. And you can do that with AI and crypto too. But, here's my big thing. I realize the big difference in what I'm saying here. People who are ideologically opposed to everything you stand for, and will dig their heels in, you don't need to interact with. But people that you can listen to and say, this person gets it. They want all the things I want, but they also like things I don't like. To take the one thing that you don't like and say, this is a bad person because of this one thing, you need to have some grace there. You need to be able to say, either I'm wrong and they see something I don't, or they're wrong and in this one case, they don't see it the way I do, and they'll come around eventually. Maybe. But they agree with me on everything else. They want free health care. They want to care for the elderly and the disabled and women and children and minorities. And they want equity. They want a world that's better for everybody. So maybe simply buying Bitcoin or using an LLM doesn't make this person my enemy. Yeah. Your enemies are the people who are ideologically against a better future. And the people who are not your enemies are the people who just don't do it the way you do. And I understand being mad at people that are wrong, especially because you can be ideologically like correct and still do everything wrong. And that's kind of where I get mostly mad with left-leaning people, is because just saying the right words and then acting like it's magically going to happen just because everybody believes it isn't the play. There's actually logistics that go into creating a better future. And unfortunately, those logistics involve using things that we have traditionally looked at as pure negatives. And that being money and governance and, yeah. I hope some of this made sense. I hope that I kind of made myself clearer with this energy thing. Like I hope that made a lot of sense, and now the title will make more sense, because I'm going to end this with a poem by another powerful revolutionary, Tupac. In the event of my demise, when my heart can beat no more, I hope I die for a principle or a belief that I had lived for. I will die before my time because I feel the shadow's depth. So much I wanted to accomplish before I reach my death. I have come to grips with the possibility and wiped the last tear from my eyes. I loved all who were positive in the event of my demise. Thank you. See you next time.